All right, we are back for part number 2 of TOBI Lab number 4. So this one includes some more, I guess, complicated or potentially interesting sentences, other than the ones about things being illuminating and Mariana and marmalade, all that stuff. Okay, so the first one is Eileen, and in fact, this one, I transcribed it for you, like word-wise, on the exercise here, because for many years I used this and people just couldn't figure out what was being said in this because the quality is kind of not great. Anyways, if I can open this up, we'll take a look at the first random transcription. And here's what we got.
Eileen's pro-English.
Eileen's pro-English in some sort of, like, let's pretend like there's an English-French debate in some Canada-like situation.
Eileen's pro-English.
Either way, what do we got here?
Eileen's pro-English.
Some interesting stuff. So we've got Eileen's, and then we've got pro, and then we've got English. So yeah, I think I transcribed this in the feedback transcriptions as like just a hyphenated like prefix to English. Like pro-English is something you can be, a word by itself.
Pro-English.
This person transcribed it as like a separate word and then a zero boundary here. Yeah, that's kind of not exactly what the zero boundary is for. It's more about trying to determine whether there's like phonetic fuzziness in the boundaries between words rather than some sort of like morphological fuzziness. But if you want to say that's a zero boundary there, that's fine. If you want to get rid of the zero boundary altogether, you can do that too. We'll just leave it for now and say good job with the 4 here and the 1 here. You can think about like Eileen's, that's kind of 2 words by itself. Eileen is pro-English, and then, morphologically we can glom that on as like a clitic, I guess. It's been a long time since I took morphology. But either way, Eileen's has a low plus high star on it. I think that's, the fact that it has an accent is a lot more clear about than what's going on with the morphology. We'll transcribe this as a low plus high star. The second syllable is stressed in Eileen. This part, and you can see here that there's a rise through it. The thing is, it's a little bit later than the ones we've seen before. So like if it were later than this, like Eileen's pro-English, where like you'd see more of like a dip in F0 going into this stress syllable and then the rise more after it, then you could transcribe it as a low star plus high. But since this is mostly rise and there's actually kind of a peak in F0 on the syllable, we'll go with a low plus high star. I like this low dash high boundary tone at the end as well.
Eileen's pro-English.
You can kind of hear her F0 rising a little bit here in English. Yeah. So we'll leave that one as well. The other question is what to do with this L star.
Eileen's pro-English.
And I transcribed this with a low star as well. In this particular transcription, this person has it on pro. And this leads to another issue with the boundary between pro and English. Oops, there's a street sweeper coming by me here. All the charm of COVID-19 times. Anyways, we need to move this over a little bit so that it's more accurately splitting up the pro and the English parts of this. And I think we got English here.
English.
Yeah, maybe a little bit further here to get the I.
English.
And what I hear here is, so you can see the L star, like the F0 contour, still kind of going down here. It bottoms out more in this engma in the middle of English, and then it pops up a little bit with the G. You can see as she produces the G, there's one of these little micro perturbations in the F0 contour. So good on all of you who paid no attention to that, because it doesn't really matter for this exercise. It's just a little blip due to the release burst. But what I hear is more of an L star here on English. So it kind of bounces down at the bottom there for the first stressed syllable of English.
Eileen's pro-English.
But that's really subtle.
Eileen's pro-English.
I agree with this person that it's there, and then it's also kind of a little bit confusing because we get a bit of a rise there anyways because of the L dash high boundary tone. But maybe you can get a bit of a clue in this F0 just continually descending down through to this release burst of the G where it starts popping up again. But that's the way I transcribed it.
Eileen's Pro English.
And this L star, like all L stars, is a little bit hard to perceive, but I think it's there. Okay, just take a little bit of a break here. And we'll go back to talking about TOBI labelers as if we've been doing anything else since the past 2 weeks began. This unit began 2 weeks ago. What we got here is
A TOBI labeler. A TOBI labeler.
all right. I like the word boundaries. I like the break indices here. We've got here, and we've got TOBI,
TOBI
and we've got labeler.
labeler.
So that's all pretty uncontroversial. We got 114 for the breaks. We've got a low here at the tail end. We might talk about that a bit.
A TOBI labeler.
So we've also got an L plus high star on TOBI and a low star on labeler.
A TOBI labeler. A TOBI labeler.
All right, so I like this low plus high star. I think that's pretty clear, and I think that's actually not how I transcribed it in the feedback I sent to you.
A TOBI.
I think I just put a high star there, but I probably should have put a low plus high star, because you can see this jump up from the in TOBI labeler. It doesn't like scoop up in sort of, which is sort of the ideal pattern you're supposed to see for a low plus high star. It just kind of like consistently goes up in F0. It's a linear sort of rise, I guess you could say, to this peak in TOBI.
A TOBI labeler.
That's clearly a high star, and I think you can easily argue for a low bit in front of it. So we'll go with low plus high star on TOBI.
TOBI.
And then the question is what to do with labeler.
Labeler. Labeler.
And
labeler.
I will say I can kind of understand why you'd put a low star here, but I don't really hear it. It's on the right syllable. If there is a stressed syllable, if there is an accented syllable in labeler, it would be the first one because that's the stressed syllable.
A TOBI labeler. A TOBI labeler.
But I actually kind of hear her just kind of like going straight through that whole thing on kind of an even plateau until she gets to the very end. So I would leave off this low star, and instead of that, I would put a high boundary tone here at the tail end. And then you get that sort of fill between the last pitch accent in the utterance or phrase, this low plus high star. After that, you get a fill of a low dash phrase accent right here until you get to the very end where there's a little bit of a rise for that high boundary tone.
A TOBI labeler. A TOBI labeler.
A TOBI labeler. Is there anything more exciting than that? No, or less. No, let's hope so. But, you know, it's pretty exciting to do this
stuff. A TOBI labeler.
Because it helps clarify what we've been doing all of our lives with this intonation business in our speech. But that's what I hear here in this particular token, is just that little continuation rise. Like when you say a TOBI labeler, it feels like, you know, there's something else you want to say beyond that. And that's why. It's because you have that little combo at the tail end. How about this one? Noodle 2.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish? Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Oh yeah, this one is weird, and I put it in here just to kind of give you an example of this last bitonal pitch accent that we haven't talked about a whole lot. I like what we're doing here with the word boundaries. If I can squeeze this one over a little bit, I can get a word break there maybe for the end of dish. Let's do it this way, and then squeeze it over like that. Right. So, do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
This is another case where like mini would normally have a hyphen after it, which would make it part of noodle. This person just split them up into two different words and said there's a one here. That's okay, fine. We're not here to argue morphology. You can do that in the rest of your linguistics life. One thing here that's subtle though, which you might not have picked up on.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Is there's kind of like a duh here, like do you have a lean mini noodle dish? So if you want to say like actually I won't do it that way. There is a D here at the beginning because it's do you have a lean mini noodle dish? And if you want to make that part like put that the U there and then like a do here, then that would be a zero boundary. Like that. You could, also transcribe it to something like this. Either way, I'm not going to get too picky about that, but that's a good example of like a zero boundary because that ooh in do is just disappearing.
Do you have a lean mini noodle
And
dish?
just going straight from the D to the yod at the beginning of you. Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Okay, but what's going on with the intonation contour here? What's happening at the pitch accent level? And I'll just kind of like kill the tension here by just clarifying that
Do you have a lean mini? Do you have a lean mini?
this is not a low star. I think this person saw this little dip here at the beginning of, which is like the H and have, I think. Let's listen closely.
Have a
Actually, it's the in have. Sorry about that. This is kind of a micro perturbation that we should not be paying attention to, like we didn't pay attention to the G in Eileen's Pro English. But I think this dip is occurring mostly because we're just going from a vowel to a voiced fricative here. So try not to be misled by that. But the pitch contour is pretty consistently going down, so it's reasonable to think, well, maybe there's an L star there, and that's what the whole pitch contour is trying to tell us. This is one of those weird ones, though, where it's this H plus downstep high star. So the speaker is starting from the high end of her range.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish? Do you have a lean mini noodle
And
dish?
then kind of leans into the lean, right? Which is the starred part of it. It's a single syllable word, so, it might be easy to miss the accent part of it because there's no other syllables to compare it to, but that's the most prominent syllable in this particular utterance.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
Right?
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
She sort of really bounces or lands on that lean, right?
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
But she starts higher than that, and then without anything seemingly that prominent before it.
Do you have a lean? Do you have a lean?
Even to the point where like do and you become like almost one word right there, where it just gets glommed into one another. And these are all not semantically that meaningful words in this particular utterance either.
Do you have a lean?
They're just there to kind of set up the question, right? What she's asking about is this content at the very end.
Mini noodle dish? Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
And it's a question too, right? So what we normally see with these yes/no questions is a pattern that I'll just kind of plop down here, like a low star on Noodle, followed by a high combo at the tail end. And I think the high combo is pretty easy to see, right? She goes way up high for the question at the tail end, and usually there's some sort of low star before it for a yes/no question in English.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
And I hear that sort of bounce on the noodle here.
Noodle.
Noodle.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
We could actually move this a little bit further forward, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Noodle.
Yeah, and then mini should be a little bit further forward to something like this. Am I right here? Or am I just messing everything up? I think it's right there.
Mini.
Yep, so we need to patch this up a little bit. Not too much. Here's our have. Yeah, that's why I was a little confused before. Here's our for the indefinite article, and here's our lean.
Lean.
And we'll put this on the vowel there in the middle of lean, just to kind of
Lean.
make it clear where it aligns.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish? Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
So you can hear that sort of emphasis on lean, I think.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
And maybe you can hear that little low star bounce on noodle.
Do you have a lean mini noodle dish?
You can definitely hear the rise at the tail end for dish.
Mini noodle dish?
That's a question. But this is basically, I wanted to put this one in here to give you one example, that H plus downstepped high star.
Do you have a lean?
That's what it sounds like. Generally at the beginning of an utterance. Let's move on to the last one before we run out of time completely. I know we're all busy people. And we'll take a look at Stalin number 4.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
Okay, this one is not easy. There's a lot going on here in this transcription. I'll patch a few things up here. We don't need a double boundary there. We do, however, want to have a boundary at the tail end of our last word, so we can kind of line it up with the forebreak, which should come at the end of the whole utterance. And then we need some sort of boundary tone combo there at the end of the whole thing. I'll move that out. This person has a high boundary tone, but remember, we're dealing with boundary tone combos now. There's always got to be a phrase accent before that. I think this one's pretty easy to read.
I was wrong, And Stalin was right.
Because it goes way up to the high end of her range. So we've got a high there again. And that looks like what you'd expect for a question, right?
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
Let's just actually focus on this second half here. So the speaker of this utterance is Mary Beckman, who is one of the progenitors of the TOBI intonation transcription system, and a fabulous scientific researcher in her own right. And I got some of these materials from her when I took her intonation class many years ago. And during that class, she told us this story about where this particular utterance comes from. And it's that in the old days of the Soviet Union, sometimes dissidents would get sent off to, some sort of prison camp or something. And but they could supposedly liberate themselves if they were willing to say that I was wrong and Stalin was right about whatever they were wrong about and Stalin thought he was right about. And so this is one way to say that utterance, I guess, which maybe would still get you out of prison free.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
Yeah, so intonation matters, I guess. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's pretend for the sake of funniness that it was, because haha, nothing's funnier than a prison camp. But anyways, Stalin was right.
And Stalin was right.
What's going on here? So I think this second half kind of makes it a little easier to perceive what's happening. And yeah, actually, I should actually clean up these word boundaries first. Let's get rid of that one. Because Stalin has 2 syllables in it.
Stalin was.
Among his many other virtues, Stalin had 2 syllables in his last name.
And Stalin was right.
And so you can see Stalin here.
Stalin was.
And this is the first stressed syllable. And what we see in this bit
Down.
is a good example, finally, of a low star plus high. So we see F0 kind of bouncing at the beginning of this, or right in the middle of the syllable, the sta part of Stalin,
Down.
and then rising after it. So this person has a high star transcribed here, which is reasonable because there is this big peak, but the timing makes it such that this is actually a low star plus high. And we'll eliminate that part of it. And Stalin was right.
And Stalin was right. And Stalin was right.
And then basically in this creek, she's going really down low in her pitch range. So what's happening there is she's producing that regular kind of yes-no question intonation pattern of a low star followed by a high at the tail end.
Right.
Yeah, so it kind of looks the same as the low star plus high before it. You don't really need to add a high after this low star, though, because you kind of get it for free with this intermediate phrase accent. Because everything between this last pitch accent in the phrase is going to be just the phrase accent up until you get to the boundary tone of the tail end. So this is the general pattern.
And Stalin was right.
To make this whole bit sound like a question, a yes/no question, even though syntactically it's a statement, right? And Stalin was right.
And Stalin was right.
Okay, Stalin was right versus Stalin was right. That's, one's a statement, one's a question. Syntactically, they're the same thing. Intonationally, we get the same pattern here for I was wrong.
I was wrong.
And I'm actually going to transcribe this with a 4 break here at the tail end because we get kind of a complete sense of stopping or disjuncture here at the tail end of this particular part of the utterance.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
So if you listen to this,
I was wrong,
and say, does that sound by itself like it's a complete utterance? And I could just stop.
I was wrong.
I was wrong. And then maybe you could add, and Stalin was right to the end of it.
And Stalin was right.
But if you listen to this break in the middle and you hear just a temporary gap sort of sense of disjuncture.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
Then you would put a 3 break here and just a H phrase accent. But I hear it kind of completely stopping and then taking a break here. So how much silence do we have really? If we can get all these things lined up, this whole bit here is just silence like that. And that's about 409 milliseconds long. That's a fairly long stretch of silence for regular speech. So I'm going to put H % here if I can, and line that up with a 4 break.
I was wrong.
And say we're doing the exact same thing as we did at the tail end. That's a yes/no question pattern. Low star followed by that high combo.
Wrong.
Wrong?
Wrong.
I was wrong? Really? And then we can put
I was.
another low star plus high on I. It's the same pattern there, but that's the syllable or word you're stressing. I was wrong. And this is nice too because we see I here, it's low all the way through I, and then we just get this rise at the tail end of it after the I is done. So again, she's emphasizing I here, right? This is the whole issue of the backstory. It's like the prisoner, like trying to make a statement about themselves.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
So they're emphasizing I and Stalin, the two
Stalin
people
was.
at play in this situation, but was is not being accented in any obvious way, right?
I was wrong.
It's just kind of
and
like
Stalin was right.
goes by really quickly. I was wrong.
I was wrong.
But it has a high F0 associated with it. And it looks like this super nice peak, F0 peak. It's just not associated with that sort of greater intensity, greater length, or greater prominence in general. And that's all I'm going to say about this, other than the fact that I'll get rid of these zero breaks here because there's not really co-articulation in these two cases. And I'll leave it at that, especially because I can't seem to move these like 2 centimeters over to get them to line up. Yeah. All right. Everything has fallen into place. And I'm going to stop there and play it one more time.
I was wrong, and Stalin was right.
And just remind you that this is why we're doing this, because transcribing intonation can help you understand what a person says. All right, I'll see you next time for the last TOBI Lab exercise, TOBI Lab number 5, which is due tomorrow. I'm going to send you a message about that as well. See you soon.